Welcome to my session. So, I came to Summit last year, and I talked about how we support and build billion-dollar ships using JIRA. And at that time, I had this burning thing in the back of my head about what we're going to do replacing our existing service desk. And I have been looking forward to giving this talk for months. And what I want to do is take you through our story so that next year when I come back to Summit, you'll be giving your story. So how this is going to work is I'm going to start off with where we were, how we had to get there to go and fix it, what I learned over that time, and then finally the results. So this is where we were 12 months ago. That was your main entry portal to work with corporate IT and HR. That portal was done in 2007, and as you can tell, it's not very current in its design, and that's exactly where we were for many, many years. That's what our customers saw. This is what our agents dealt with. And our agents had this complicated system. It was okay, it worked, did the job, but that's our day-to-day interaction for our agents and customers. That cost us $85,000 a year in licensing alone, all right? If you want to be stabbing yourself with a fork in the eye, that's the cost to do it. So, but there were lots of workarounds in place. The true cost was actually more than that. But that was okay. Everyone said it is working, so why change it? Does this sound like you? So who here at the moment has got a system like that? Put your hands up. Yep. Who's thinking about doing JIRA Service Desk? Yep. All right, good. So let's begin. We could have fixed that problem, but it was working. Our customers didn't really complain. That was their way to work with HR and IT. They'd done it since 2007, no problems. We in IT said, well, of all the other things we could be doing, we don't really need to fix it. So we just kept pressing snooze on the problem, time and time again. We weren't going to fix it because there were other business things we could fix instead. But, and here's the big but, it all came to a screaming halt one day when we did have a problem with the system. It wasn't compatible with the new browser, so we ring up our services partner like we've always done before. The number is disconnected. The reason for this is that product we're using, end of life, out of warranty, everything about it was just dead. It was absolute dead end. And we kind of looked at ourselves, that's going to be a problem. And these workarounds we had in place were getting expensive, so we decided that, okay, well, it's probably about time to do something about it. And that's when I was here at Summit last year. So we did what we always do, and that is we go to market. So we went to market and we said, well, we actually found out it's going to be pretty expensive to change it. So we were looking in the realms of somewhere like $400,000 to $700,000 to fix this problem, licensing alone. So let's call that $1 million by the time we implement it. Working at, say, 10% profit, you're going to have to sell $10 million worth of product to pay for corporate IT's ticketing system. Now, in summary, the executive summary, that is nuts. And so people said, well, the system actually isn't broken, so how much further, how many more workarounds can we put in place just to keep it going? Because I don't necessarily want to go and find that $1 million. And what are the requirements? Because it's just ticketing, right? How hard can it be? So we have the tagline with BAE, which is inspired work. And we've got these 3 company values, which are trusted, innovative, and bold. Now, I was hearing we were going to market and we're looking at spending $1 million. It's going to take us 12 months to do it. And I was at Summit here going, all right, I'm going to have to go and look at one of the company values because I think we can do it for far less than that, and we'll do it in JIRA Service Desk. We already use JIRA. We already use the product suite. So how hard can it be? And then I thought, what is my role in the company? Like, at what point do I say, I'm going to say and call you on this one, I think it's wrong, because my role is to provide the best outcome to not only our external customers, but our internal customers as well. And so, as Barney would say, challenge accepted. So I went to our commercial people after coming from Summit last year and said, look, I know you've gone to market, I know you've got this request for tender, how are we going to do this with Atlassian? How can we make it work? Because Atlassian don't do requests for tenders. And our partner is saying, well, we can do something with you if you can get more information. So our commercial and procurement people said, okay, you're under the same rules. So we've got 3 vendors that we're working with at the moment. You can prepare and do the pitch for JIRA Service Desk. And that's exactly what we did. So how hard can it be? Because it's just ticketing. We've got all the experience. I have a team of 5 who understand JIRA and its interactions. But what we started to do is go and speak to all those people and ask them, what do you really need? The requirement spec that was sent for quote was actually about this long, and it had things like configuration management database and how to manage problem records and how to do incidents. But it was like, of all those things that it's adding up to that $1 million implementation, what do you really need? Like, let's not have the Ferrari because that's quite expensive. Let's say, if I was to replace this in a sizable chunk that's achievable, what do you really need? So I put together the pitch. I had 3 hours. That's what the external suppliers got. So I had the exact same time. I actually used Azure Cloud to put it together and pitched it to the review team. And it was the same review panel members who had done the other ITSM tools. And the result of that was 5 out of the 6 said, JIRA Service Desk actually does make the sense because it's going to interact with our development team. So people put a service request in for something in our finance system. That's going to result in a task that's going to be given to a development team to fix something. That goes on an Agile board. That makes sense. And we said it's going to use all the things we've already got. So why go and buy an extra reporting system? We'll use reporting service we've already got. We'll go and use existing databases we've already got. We'll add some interactions with our Oracle ERP system. So what we're going to do is take all the existing systems we have in the moment, best of breed, put JIRA as the ticketing solution, and then work with those external systems. So then it was, okay, be careful what you wish for, because then they said yes. So that sixth person that was a holdout on that team actually didn't say no, they just said maybe. And that was because we have external reporting requirements on things like change requests, and I hadn't demonstrated that enough. So I got another week, go back into reporting, demonstrate it, and then it was 6 out of 6. So then we decided, how are we going to do this thing? Because my team is supporting my internal customers, and I don't want to draw them away for many, many months to do an ITSM internal thing. So what we said is, okay, well, we'll do it using Agile. So we had this thing called OC1. OC1 is Operational Capability 1. What are the things you really, really need for day 1 to go live? And that's a smaller chunk, HR. So we'll do that one first. Then we'll do IM&T, which is corporate IT. And that was our OC1. No more than 2 weeks after HR. Why is that important? Because you wouldn't believe the number of interactions HR and IT have with each other. And you don't want them on separate systems for too long. Last year, when Vistaprint gave their demo, I found the phone number for Janet Vistaprint, gave her a call and said, tell me what you would do better. Number one thing was this thing, don't have people on split systems. Things like, you have a new hire coming to your company, they need to have their account created, IT does that. Those are the type of interactions that happen across there. Our sprint cycle was 2 weeks, that's how we got to the 2 weeks as well. Then we're going to break stuff. Don't be under any illusion that you won't break things. You will break things. So OC2, that's where you're going to fix that. And then it was just iterations after that. So we're in this continuous improvement cycle now. But yeah, I always set a really low expectation for people saying, I'm going to break stuff because since 2007 till now, there will be somebody's written something custom, there's a system that was undocumented. We're going to break stuff, but letting people know that there's an avenue to get that corrected in your OC2 gives people lots of confidence. They'll say, I'll go without it for a couple of weeks, knowing that you're going to fix it next time. But one thing that really won people over was we're not going to fix just IT and HR's problems. We're actually going to fix some other problems around the company. So things like we didn't have single sign-on and we didn't have crowd. And I said, as part of my proposal, we're going to install crowd, we're going to hook that to Active Directory, and then we're going to hook up Fisheye and Crucible and Apache Subversion, all those things, so that those dollars that you're spending to fix IT's ticketing problem are actually going to fix developers' problems, fix things that the business cares about, and that makes your pitch much, much, much better. So this is what I talk about. Fix the things, tell people other things it's going to do. So as part of this, we included, I said crowd, but also HR had a list of things that they wanted fixed as well. So people start to really look forward to that. When this implementation comes, I'm going to get a better user experience, plus all those other burning things are going to get corrected too. So how long is it going to take? Well, 5 sprints is what we said we could do it in. And you've got to be realistic about what's going to be achievable. And we had these 2-week sprints that we were going along, and that was consistent with other teams. So other teams were working sprints too. We had to line up with, there's going to be a cutover date, and that's going to be between the sprint for you and there. You don't want to do it mid-sprint. What we sort of did then was break it down into epics. So we had all of HR's operational capability 1 items. Things like incident management had to work on day one. Request fulfillment, things like service requests and being able to buy laptops. You don't want to interfere with that with the business. Knowledge management. So we said, well, one of the big wins we're going to get is integrating our self-service. So we said knowledge management had to be there. Change. There were some bits of change that had to happen because external reporting. So things like in change requests for modifications to your finance system, you'll need to report on those. They need to be there. And problem management. We also had some other systems that were outside of our team that we had to make sure they're aware of. Things like automated software self-service, access request systems that would use the API. They had to be available day one as well. And then pretty much that's how we broke it down. So that's the easy bit. All that planning and telling people what you're going to do, that's the easy bit. But we had to really create a persona about this. It wasn't just a technology system. This was going to make a big change to the way the business does work. And so we had to start to say, well, how are we going to tell people about that? And one of the things that happened at the time was like, why are we doing this? Was we got somebody from corporate comms to come and join our team. And I was like, what? You know, this is going to be a bit fuzzy. And we were dancing through the field of poppies with this thing. What's going to happen? And it was, she created this image. And it was this one. And it was, we're finally going to get rid of that old bus. We're going to stomp it out with JIRA. And it was going to be, walk out, here comes JIRA Service Desk. So we marketed this change, telling everyone that this is coming. At our all-hands meetings, everyone knew about JIRA Service Desk is coming, how we're going to fix it, what we're going to do. And the big blow-up Godzilla was the key to that. But, you know, that's good at some levels, but there are some people you've got to get to, and they won't respond to that, but they respond to that instead. So, you know, we were removing being able to log by email, and how many times I told people that? I said, Grumpy Cat will tell you. And, you know, who can go past Doge? So, yes, we gave them those sort of things. But one thing we found is that we really needed to work out, people are going to tell us about things that we didn't know about. So there's external systems and the things you're going to break. And we found very early on, one of the first service desks you should create is for the implementation team. So start using what you're about to deploy. And so we created a JIRA Service Desk implementation project that was the very first one in the portal. So people who wanted to know about JIRA Service Desk would actually just go to the service desk and ask a question. Those questions became feedback, like, that system over there, okay, got to make sure we include that in the next sprint. But it meant that when we started to go to HR and start to talk about what they need in their portal, and they had some feedback, they thought it later on, they went and logged it too. So they started to get very early on what the user experience is going to be like. So I can't stress this enough now, use the system you're going to use to deploy the system you're going to use. A lot of things like infrastructure changes when you add crowd was a big deal for us. And I was thinking one day, I need 5 minutes time from all these different people, from different business units or in different parts of the Active Directory and different use cases. How are you going to do it? Does anyone know what that is? Who's been to Australia or seen it? This is a Tim Tam. Tim Tam is a chocolate biscuit. Now, you would be surprised how much goodwill you can get with a Tim Tam. So I'm standing in our coffee line up at our cafe, and I was just thinking, I need 5 minutes. And there is this line of people, and I'm thinking, if I bought everyone a coffee and a Tim Tam, I've got 5 minutes time. So what we did, marketing the change. Took over our laptops, went over to our cafe, set up. We had one person who was going to get the coffees because, you know, once you're sitting down, you can't go anywhere. I've got you for 5 minutes. And another person was actually looking at how the calls were coming into the system. Was the automation working? And so we actually got a lot of customer insight from back at Tim Tams. $100, get 20 people in the morning, and you can actually start to test to see if the system's working. Does your portal make sense? Do the keywords make sense? So I'm not quite sure what the equivalent here is, but Tim Tams, way to go. So that's been talking about how we got there, but what does it look like? Well, this is it. So as I mentioned down the bottom left, there's our JIRA Service Desk implementation project. If you want to ask a question, if you want to get in touch with the team, because a lot of people had these questions, but they had like spreadsheets that were tucked away, and we're like, if we knew about that, we could fix it before day one. Go live was going to be so important because we don't want to break stuff. And this is that you wouldn't believe what a difference it is when you have, if you've used JIRA for software projects, that's fine. But if you've got customers who are expecting things like HR, payroll processing, and credit card acquittals, and all those things, you can't break those on day one. And so we made sure we got out there all the time saying, go and use the portal, tell us about what your problem is. So HR Service Desk was our day one, mainly because it's a slightly smaller chunk we could do. And they were a team of about 40 people. They were doing, at the time, they told me 250 requests a week. Turns out that's 1,000, but that's okay. And one thing we discovered with HR is that while you might think HR Service Desk is like a group of people who just deal with the service requests, that goes all the way back through to things like payroll office. And that was something we didn't consider. So when the 250 item, we talk about 250 calls a week, was actually 1,000, was that they would actually print out the old calls, like print out the calls they're working on, take them to payroll, and payroll would do things like changing people's reward, or they would be changing people's bonus, those sorts of things. And we said, well, why don't we just include that so that you don't have that anymore? So you just, you grab the call and you push it to the pay office and they do it, and it comes back and the customer sees a whole lot. They're like, absolutely, let's do that. So just be aware that HR is, it's that whole iceberg thing, so just be careful with them. And then IT, so corporate IT was after that. If you work in corporate IT, you want to get the one right, because you can't dodge these ones, because they work next to you every day. And so we had a lot of people with IT who wanted to see this thing work. So really, really good to see that you got to get people in early. And then one thing that sort of popped up that we really had to accommodate was this thing called Bright Ideas, which is business improvement. So on here you'll see business improvement, HR, and IT. Right. We spent days deciding over these levels. Down the left-hand side with sort of access and purchase defaults. Those, we used some analytics and checked what are people asking for. And access was like the number one thing. So things like you want access to a system, you want access to a network drive, is the web blocking getting in your way? Those are the three things there that people mention time and time again. And these are the things that Tams bought us, was telling us, what do you want to see there? Because there's no point IT owning the portal, it's your customers that own it. And as part of our continuous improvement, we come back and evaluate, are these things still appropriate? Have things changed? We also thought about, this is all well and good for once you've done your testing and people said this is how I like it laid out, but how do they get in touch with you later on? And so it's very important to say, look, my request doesn't feature any of these. I've just got an idea that maybe you want to consider. And so I just want to speak to someone and tell us, and I have an idea or improvement, because this is a living thing. This isn't a project you deliver and then you never come back to it again. It is a living, breathing thing. Over on the HR side, HR only wanted 3 levels, and they really have, HR deals mostly with other HR people. And one of the areas they spent a lot of their time on was actually just level 3 HR only, saying, their number one thing was department and supervisor changes, like lines of and spans of control, higher duties allowances. So we had to spend a fair bit of time just focusing on them, because they said, well, we just want it like the old system. It had one thing, and then we did the categorization, but they didn't really realise the potential they could now get. And it's your job, to give that best outcome, is to actually tell them what this thing can do. This is an example of what we used to do. So you go from that very first slide, and I showed you what we had in the portal, and it was sort of one text box, one summary, and that was it. Well, we started to build these things to show HR to say, look, these are things, what are the mandatory things you need for that type of request? Because I still have that mindset of, we just have one request and we just filter it and then we just send it to the right person. So you really have to sort of guide them. You might know how JIRA works, and it's really evident to you, but for HR, they didn't necessarily put the 2 and 2 together. So, what went well? Well, you can't get to everyone, be under no illusion. So what we said is, okay, every team that we've got 30 teams, you've got to have a champion, because we can't get to them, we're only a small team of 5. So they nominated champions that we had meetings with and said, this is what's coming, this is what we're thinking of, these are design decisions we made in the last week, and they would take them back to their teams and then give it back to us. It's much more easier to manage that sort of like department champions than it is to manage your whole department. Demonstrate early. We would often publish the link, so people, this is what we're thinking, this is what it looks like this week. It would change, but our IT people like to just get in there and mess around with it. If we found any opportunity, any training session that had like a 5-minute break, we'd talk about his service desk, his agent view, what do you think? And so getting it there early is key for most people, and certainly for HR who at one point were actually really apprehensive about this change, saying, well, you're talking about it and I haven't seen it, let's have a look at it. So we would often give people access to the demonstration systems. And use it really, really early to get the feedback about how you're going, because some people will sit back, they won't come and see you, but if they can go and use the portal and then start to experience what a customer feels like, that's the way to do it. So what will we do next time? Well, HR is not a project organisation. We were doing our sprints, we were doing our deliveries, and everything was going really well, and we had a date locked in for HR, which was going to be June 1, and we'd been talking about that for months, and then the day before, they're like, stop. And we're like, what? Everything's working fine. You've tested it. It's fine. They're like, no, we're going to do a pay run because the pays go out next week. I'm like, why didn't you tell us about this before? And then they mentioned, well, see, you in IT have projects that you deliver, and that's how you work. Well, we deal with the transactions of the business, and we don't have people set aside for this project. They're doing this on top of things like payroll and then bonuses, all those things that are going. So they haven't been able to get to it this week because they're doing that. So we don't want to go with a half-baked system. So can you just slow down a little bit? And it was just one day, like, I hadn't actually thought about that. I thought that they had just given us resources. No, it was on top. And so you just got to brief them more often, tell them when it's coming, making sure they're okay with it, they've got the resources to go with it. They don't care about the technology, that's what the features are. So with our sprints, we would start to tell them, next week you're going to get department supervisor changes. You're going to get some automation in payroll. That was the feature we had to do with them. But it meant that we had to have some automated testing because, again, there's not a project organisation. We've changed something. We'd go back to ask them, can you just check this works? They're like, well, you can't because we have to do a whole pile of stuff next week, so you have to wait again. So automated testing. And another thing that happened with us too was that we did an upgrade. And again, we've done upgrades in JIRA many, many times before, no problems. And I did it on Friday night and everything went fine. We did the upgrade, service test went fine. And on Monday morning, I get this call like, it's running like a pig. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, we've done this before, nothing special, just a small version upgrade. We had 2 bugs that were actually introduced, massive difference in performance. So an issue went from 3 seconds to a minute. And the portal was a bit sluggish. It was okay, but it was a bit sluggish. But we really didn't have the automated testing in place to test for those things. And we spent a week trying to work out, was it us? And then we spent a week with Atlassian, we find out it was them. And the business is like, we need to get this fixed because the amount of people you're touching now is so much larger that it's not just development community, it's everyone who's working, whether they're working and building ships or they're on the flight line, immediately it's fixed. A minute is a big problem. So definitely include automated testing. Whether that's like the grinder scripts or something you do, or you've got some other testing suite, got to include that next time. Also, go live date is before your training. We had our project, we had our plan, we had our sprints, and we said we're going to give training for all of our IoT people between this week here, but the delivery date's actually out here, so that's okay. Most of it's going to be there, but people in the training course, things have changed a little bit since last week or yesterday, and the key point was actually have it before your training, do your training, and then give yourself a week after that to correct some things. We thought we'd just do it at the same time. So certainly the go live date is before your training. Consistent statuses, and this is where I would say demonstrate early so that just do the out of the box things that actually work for you. In most cases, they probably will. We decided that no, we know better. We'll change some statuses so that in HR, the very first status is wait for triage, right? And over in IT, we have waiting on support. And so our customers now say, where in the workflow are those different? Because the status names are different, therefore they must have different workflows. So when you're implementing these projects, have consistent statuses for your customers so that they understand where their thing is, right? And also confirm the HR use cases. So when they talked about it, someone logs a call and then we just deal with it. No, actually show me what you're doing. So take me through it. Take me through the office. Show me how you actually deal with that call so that when someone asks for something to be changed on payroll, where does it go? What else is important? Single sign-on is important. And we provide this. We use a plugin to do this. It's the Kerberos single sign-on plugin so that when you open a browser, it automatically logs you into Crowd, which then automatically logs you into JIRA and JIRA Service Desk. I didn't think that was a big deal for Chrome. It didn't work in Chrome, but we thought The standard browser is IE. That's what we've got in our SOE. Just, as long as it works in IE, it's fine. We went go live and we've got a flood of calls. Doesn't work in Chrome. I'm like, but Chrome's not standard operating environment. Doesn't matter. That really is important for people to get that to work. But customers said, well, now I have to log in. I didn't have to log in yesterday in the old system. So single sign-on is definitely important. Change control. So with our change control, now that you're affecting everyone in the business, you need to have that really down pat and managed so that you'll have a backlog of things you want to include as improvements. How we do that now is we have a change board, which one person from every service desk, so HR and IT and business improvement, finance, they all see what the changes are that are going to be the next month, and they say, yeah, that's actually the right way to go. It means you can also prioritise that list and include that in your own agile sprints, but you've got to have that in there because you just risk so much customer confusion if you change things in ways they're not expecting. And also make sure that you've got a pathway to do in continuous improvement. Part of the reasons we got stuck in that old system is we didn't upgrade and we didn't think about improvements, and so it just stayed there. And there are things that you can do to sort of get these gradual improvements and keep it going in the software, and also think about how you can upgrade in the future and what other automation things can we do. So certainly have a path that you can provide for continuous improvement. So where are we today? Well, we're at 4,700 end users, slightly more than that on the outside. So we have 4,700 employees who use it regularly every week on the inside, and then we've got external customers on the outside. We didn't really think about it at the time, but what it's done is the costs for implementing Service Desk is not just fixing HR and IT's problem. You're also using that money to support your own customers. So think about which column that changes from a budgetary point of view. That it's not just a cost centre, not just a cost centre that you're causing. 250 agents. So they're people who work on calls every day of the week. And it took us 3 weeks to get from that old system to the new. Now, people talk about data migration. Just call it legacy data because one of the things we did early on was decide not to migrate. So service requests and things within IT and HR actually have a relatively short lifespan. And we decided, do you really want to move all those old issues into your new system? It's going to take you weeks and months to do it. And what's the real benefit for doing it? And HR said that they needed that because they want to go back a call 4 years ago. So he said, well, we'll provide you an interface one day to do that, but we're not migrating. And when I spoke to other customers here last year, data migration, don't do it. Just stay well away from it. So since July, we've done 30,000 service requests, and it's all ticking along quite nicely. So HR went live on June 15, and IT on July 1, and then it's all been fine since then. And that performance degradation I talk about, for most people, that was a couple of weeks I had to go through with pain. But considering the improvement of the customer experience and the agent experience they get now, that's fine. So we've dealt with that. But you start to get the feedback from people saying, okay, how did you go? And you get things like this. It was an absolute pain and a nightmare before. If you fix that, so you're much better to do business with. We have a base now where we can do this improvement, which we couldn't do before. But the legacy system was just impossible. So we're starting to see this come through from our customers. So I guess what you're all after is, what did it cost? Well, it was $105,000. So not $1 million. It was 105. We haven't had to employ anybody else, and that's our yearly agent ongoing costs. And then from our office of the CIO in the UK, that's what they say. So thank you very much for coming to have a session, and I look forward to at least one of you giving a talk next year.